The last time all three of my children were under my roof. They smiled like strangers and left like thieves. That Sunday dinner still burns in my chest, not from the marinara sauce, but from the bitterness I swallowed with every forced laugh. I raised them with love. They showed up with pens. Now they want my house. Before I forget who they really are, tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because what comes next you won't want to miss. The smell of burnt garlic clung to the curtains like regret. I stared at the small stain on the beige carpet near the dining table, the one Thomas left years ago, with his muddy cleats. I never fully cleaned it. Back then, part of me thought it was sweet. A small piece of my son left behind. Now it just looked like dirt. I heard the front door crack open. "Hi, Mom," 3 voices, layered with false warmth. Emily's came first, the highest, a chirpy trill that used to calm me, but now scraped against my nerves. Nathan followed with a nod, his cologne arriving before he did. Musky, expensive. Thomas, the youngest, came in last like always. Sunglasses indoors. Smiling too wide. "I made your favorite," I said, forcing my voice into something hopeful. "Spaghetti and meatballs. Homemade marinara." I looked into their eyes. None of them remembered. None of them cared. We sat. The wooden chairs groaned beneath us, their old joints echoing mine. I served each of them a plate, my hands trembling just a little, maybe from the heat of the pot. Maybe not. So Emily began, dabbing her mouth with a cloth napkin she had brought herself. "We've been talking, and we think it's time we, made some plans." Nathan cleared his throat. "For the future. For your security. For your peace of mind," Thomas added, flashing that same damn grin. "Yeah, just being responsible." My fork froze halfway to my mouth. "What kind of plans?" Emily reached into her purse, that purse, the red one with the gold buckle I gave her last Christmas. She didn't remember that either. She slid a folder across the table, cream-colored, too formal. "Too final, it's just a simple transfer," she said. "We spoke to someone. If you sign the house over to us now, it'll make things easier for you, for all of us." Nathan stared straight at me, his eyes colder than I remembered. "It's better this way." Thomas leaned forward, elbows on the table, completely unbothered. Just in case. Before things get confusing. "You've been forgetting things lately, haven't you?" My stomach dropped. There it was. The line, the dig. The knife hidden behind the smile. I laughed, but it cracked. "So I'm losing it now, am I?" "No one said that," Emily rushed. "But we just want to be prepared for when you don't remember who we are," Thomas said, grinning. He thought he was being funny. He didn't see my hand shaking beneath the table. Silence filled the room. It felt too warm. The sauce tasted too acidic. My throat burned. I stared at the folder, the pen resting on top of it like a loaded gun. "You think I'm that far gone?" I whispered. Nathan sighed. "We're just trying to help by taking my house." I snapped. Emily flinched. "I buried your father in this house," I said, my voice rising. "I changed your diapers on that couch. I held you through fevers. I fought monsters you imagined under your beds. This house isn't just wood and brick, it's my whole life." More silence. "This one sharp and tight." Thomas stood up. "Let's not make this dramatic, okay? You've always said you didn't want to be a burden." That word, burden. My fork slipped from my fingers and hit the plate like thunder. I looked at all 3 of them, my children. My blood, and all I saw were strangers with keys in their pockets and dollar signs in their eyes. "I'm not signing anything," I said. Nathan stood too. "You will eventually." Emily's eyes flicked toward him. "Nathan, she will." He cut her off. "She just needs time." I didn't answer. I couldn't. My throat had closed completely. They left about an hour later. Barely touched their food. Didn't even pretend to say "I love you" at the door. The house went quiet again. Too quiet. I sank into the chair, the one with the small tear on the armrest. The one I used to rock them in when they couldn't sleep. I sat there for a long time, staring at the folder they left behind. The pen was still there. I picked it up and snapped it in half. That's when I knew they weren't just trying to take my house. They were trying to erase me, and I wasn't going to let that happen. The waiting room smelled like antiseptic and old magazines. I sat in a stiff vinyl chair, my purse clutched tightly in my lap like a lifeline. The clock ticked too loudly. When my name, Margaret Hill, was called, it was by a young nurse who didn't look old enough to drive, let alone deliver the kind of news I was bracing for. I smiled anyway. That's what women like me do. We smile, we stay calm. We make things easier for everyone else. Inside the doctor's office, the walls were an uninspired beige, the kind that makes you feel small, like wallpaper in a forgotten motel. I focused on a framed photo of a mountain range, a weak attempt at comfort. The doctor, Dr. Keating, came in holding a file, his eyes too gentle for the words I knew were coming. He sat down and cleared his throat. "It's early signs, Margaret. Mild cognitive impairment. Possibly the beginning stages of Alzheimer's." The words hit like ice water. Not a slap colder than that, slower, like drowning without thrashing. I tried to speak, but my tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Finally, I managed. I've just been misplacing words. Names, that happens with age, it does, he said softly. But combined with the test results, it suggests a pattern. That word made it feel like I was turning into a statistic. I looked down at my hands. My wedding ring was still there, even though Henry wasn't. My fingers had started to resemble my mother's, thinner, lined. I wondered if she felt this way when she started forgetting my birthday. Is it definite? I asked. It's not definitive, he said. Not yet. But I recommend we begin monitoring. And maybe consider legal preparations while your cognition is still strong. Legal preparations. It felt like I was being quietly escorted out of my own life. He handed me a pamphlet. I didn't read the title. I just slipped it into my purse like a shameful receipt. As I stood to leave, I noticed movement through the narrow crack of the open door. I stepped closer and squinted. Thomas. My youngest. The one who used to cry when I left for work. He was standing outside the office. His back against the wall, face half hidden behind his phone. I froze. He wasn't supposed to be there. He didn't notice me, or maybe he did and didn't care. He was scrolling, laughing at something. Standing outside the room where I had just been told my mind might be slipping away, I stepped out. Thomas, he startled. Looked up just a second too late to make it seem natural. Oh hey, he said, shoving his phone into his jacket. I was just, wanted to check in. See how it went. How did you know I was here? I asked. He hesitated. Emily mentioned it. My chest tightened. That wasn't true. I hadn't told any of them. I didn't want to worry them, or maybe I didn't want to hand them ammunition. I didn't think you'd be interested. I said. His expression shifted for just a moment, like he realized I wasn't as far gone as he'd hoped. I'm always interested, Mom, he said smoothly. We just want what's best for you. That phrase again. I walked past him without answering. The pamphlet in my purse rustling like a whisper. When we reached the car, he offered to drive. No, I said. He tried to insist. I said no again. There was an edge in my voice he wasn't used to. He backed off. I slid into the driver's seat and locked the doors before he could say anything else. The ride home was silent, broken only by the hum of old tires on cracked pavement. I remembered how he used to ask me to sing along with the radio. Now he sat in the passenger seat, checking his phone, probably texting his siblings. By the time I pulled into the driveway, something inside me had shifted. They weren't hovering like worried children. They were circling like vultures. And then the thought hit me, cold and unmistakable. They weren't waiting for me to lose my mind. They were hoping I would. As he stepped out of the car and muttered a quick goodbye, I stayed where I was. I watched him walk away, tall, careless, the same boy I once held through a fever. Now a man I barely recognized. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, and in that moment, I understood this wasn't about care. It wasn't about love. It was about control. And they weren't going to have it. Not without a fight. I found the documents by accident. I wasn't snooping. I was looking for the blue envelope, the one where I kept the last birthday card Henry ever gave me. I hadn't read it in a long time, and that day, I needed to. I needed his voice in my head again, the soft way he called me Mags. The ridiculous little hearts he added in his handwriting like a love-struck teenager instead. I found a folder tucked behind the file cabinet drawer, one of those old metal drawers that never opens all the way and always pinches your fingers if you're not careful. This folder was new. The corners were sharp. There was no dust. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. Legal papers. Property transfer forms. A copy of the deed to my house, my name. My signature, except I didn't remember signing anything. The room felt smaller, hotter. I sat down hard on the edge of the bed, papers spilling across the quilt. I stared at the signature. It looked like mine, but not quite. The curve of the M was too neat. The tail of the G didn't loop the way I always looped it. It wasn't mine. I knew it. They had forged my name. All three of them had access to my files, my mail. All three had watched me for months, treating me like I was already fading. And now they were erasing me, one line at a time. I grabbed my phone. My hands shook so badly I nearly dropped it twice before I found Emily's name. I called. She didn't answer. I didn't bother with Thomas. I called Nathan. He picked up on the third ring. Hey, Mom. My voice came out tighter than I meant it to. What is this? The deed transfer. Who did this? There was a pause, just one heartbeat too long. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I'm talking about. Look, we were trying to help. It's just a precaution. You've been forgetting things. We didn't want anything to happen legally. If what, Nathan? I said, if I become useless? If I forget your names? That's not what I said. It's what you meant, he sighed. We'll talk about it later, okay? No, I said. We'll talk about it now. I hung up. I couldn't feel my hands, only heat in my chest, my face, behind my eyes. I pressed both palms to the sides of my head, like I could physically hold my mind together. A forged signature. Theft in slow motion. They were trying to make me disappear before I was even gone the rest of the day. I moved through the house like a ghost. My footsteps echoed. Every photograph felt like a lie. That picture of Thomas at 7, grinning with chocolate smeared across his face he used to cry when I left the room. Now he was conspiring with his siblings to take what was mine. I sank into Henry's old recliner. The leather was cracked, the armrest molded to his shape. I ran my hand along the seam. The refrigerator hummed softly in the kitchen, the only sound in the house. And for the first time in my life, I was afraid of my own children. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak in the house felt like betrayal. Every shadow reminded me I wasn't safe in the home I built with my own two hands. At dawn, I made coffee black and bitter, the way Henry liked it. I went back to the file cabinet and pulled out every legal document I owned, the mortgage, the insurance, the will from 20 years ago. I sat at the kitchen table and read each one, line by line, like a woman searching for her own name in a world determined to erase her. And I made a decision. If they wanted a war, I would give them one, but I wouldn't scream, I wouldn't beg, I wouldn't accuse them, no. I would outthink them. They had forgotten who raised the man they were about to remember. The walls of this house know too much. They've soaked in years of lullabies, whispered apologies, silent screams. And now they were holding secrets, ugly ones. The kind that rot in corners when no one is paying attention. It was just after midnight when I heard it, voices muffled, but familiar. The creak of the floorboards told me they were upstairs. In the guest room, the one that used to be filled with stuffed animals and faded quilts. I slipped out of my bedroom barefoot, one hand steadying me on the banister. The wood was cold. The air was sharp with the scent of Emily's overdone lavender perfume. My robe brushed softly against the floor. I didn't care. They didn't know I was awake. I stopped just outside the door, left open a sliver too wide. Their voices drifted out. Thomas was laughing. We'll put it on the market before the end of summer. The realtor says the neighborhood's peaking. Emily's voice followed. We need to move fast before she changes her mind. Or before she, Nathan cut her off. She's not changing her mind. She signed the damn thing. We just need to file it. There was a pause. Then a laugh, low and cold. She doesn't even remember signing it, Nathan added. And if she does, we'll say she's confused. Who's going to believe her over the three of us? My breath caught. They had planned this. All of it. It wasn't confusion. It wasn't concern. It wasn't misguided protection. It was deliberate, coordinated, cruel. This was theft, disguised as love. I backed away slowly. My heel hit a loose board. Click. I froze. The voices stopped. I didn't breathe. Then Thomas said, a little too loudly, did you hear that? I turned and moved quietly down the stairs and into the kitchen. I pulled out a chair and sat just as Emily came down, that fake sweet smile barely holding on. Hey, Mom, she said. You're up late. You okay? I looked up at her slowly, meeting her eyes. Couldn't sleep. Behind her, Nathan hovered on the stairs. Thomas lingered behind him like a shadow. Something on your mind? Emily asked, lifting the kettle from the stove. She wasn't making tea. She was buying time. I shrugged. Just thinking about the house. Her hands paused only for a moment, barely noticeable. But I saw it. I've lived here for 40 years, I said, gently tapping the table. Every crack in these floorboards holds a memory. I don't think I could ever leave. Thomas stepped in, trying too hard to sound casual. Well, it's just a house, Mom. No, I said quietly. It's my house. The silence thickened. Nathan shifted his weight. Emily looked down. You all forget, I continued, that this place was paid off with your father's overtime. With my second job at the diner. With skipped vacations. With sacrifices you never even knew about. Emily opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand. It surprised me how steady it was. I might be forgetful, I said. I might lose words, names, moments, but what I won't lose is my instinct. And right now, it's screaming. None of them spoke. I stood slowly. My knees cracked. My spine ached. But I met their eyes, one by one. When the time comes, I said, you'll remember this conversation. Nathan's jaw tightened. Are you threatening us? I smiled. It didn't reach my eyes. No, Nathan. I'm remembering. I walked away, my step steady on the cold tile. They had tried to hide their betrayal behind closed doors. But they forgot something vital. This is still my house, and it hears everything. The lawyer looked like he belonged on a golf course. Not behind a desk. Khakis, loafers, a smile too wide. Talking too fast. Nice to finally meet you, Mrs. Hill, he said. Extending a hand I had no desire to shake. His office smelled like stale coffee and laminate. Cheap. Efficient, no soul. Call me Margaret, I said. Settling into the stiff leather chair. My bones were tired, but they were not weak. He glanced down at the file in front of him, then back at me. I understand you're here about some confusion regarding property transfers. Something like that. He smiled again, but this time it wavered. I wasn't there for small talk. I'd also like to revisit any assets from my father's estate, I said. His name was Edward Harris. He passed and that stopped him. He blinked. That was quite a while ago. You believe there's something unresolved? I don't believe, I said. I know, he nodded slowly, his fingers already moving across the keyboard. Give me a moment. I'll pull the file from the archives. I waited. 10 minutes. Then 15. My eyes drifted to a framed photo on his desk. His family, I assumed. A wife, 2 daughters, a golden retriever. Everyone smiling. Everyone pretending things last forever. They don't. He said finally. Here we are. It appears your father left behind a fund set up through a private trust. It was designated to pass directly to his daughter, to me, I said. Sitting up straighter, yes, he continued. Upon your mother's death, she passed in, I told him. He nodded, lips pressing into a thin line. Then the transfer should have occurred at that time. Should have? He hesitated, scrolled again, then frowned. Whilst it shows here the fund was claimed in full. Signed for by, he didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he turned the screen slightly toward me. My name. My father's trust. My inheritance. And a signature. Not mine. Not even close. Everything inside me went still. Who? I whispered. He scanned the screen again. There's a notation here. It was authorized by a Nathan Hill. My son. My son took my father's money 12 years ago. I stared at the screen, a single line of black ink, a fake signature, a stolen moment. He hadn't told me. Hadn't asked. Hadn't even pretended. My throat tightened, grief clawing its way up. Are you okay, Mrs. Hill? He asked. No, I said, but I nodded anyway. I walked out of that office with copies of everything, clutching the papers to my chest like a lifeline. When I got into my car, it felt foreign. The air was stale. The steering wheel rough beneath my palms. 12 years. He'd been sitting on that secret for 12 years, watching me struggle to patch the roof. Watching me clip grocery coupons, watching me sell my jewelry when Henry got sick. And he said nothing. That night, I sat in the living room with the lights off, the house silent. I thought about my father, how proud he was the day Henry and I bought this house. How he'd said, "You're doing better than we ever did, Mags." I thought about how I never asked him for anything. And still, he tried to leave me something. A quiet act of love, tucked away for the day I'd need it most. Nathan stole that love from me and didn't even flinch. I sat with the anger. Let it rise. Let it settle. Then I opened a new file on my desk and labeled it Contingency. Because this wasn't grief anymore. It was war, and I had just found my opening move. I didn't cry. Not after leaving the lawyer's office. Not after reading the forged documents under the flickering kitchen light. Not after learning my own son had stolen the last thing my father ever gave me. Tears felt like a luxury when I couldn't afford anymore. Instead, I started my day at 6 a.m. Same as always. 1 slice of toasted rye. Black coffee, no sugar. I sat by the window, listening to the world breathe before it remembered to rush. But something had shifted. That morning, I picked up the phone not to call my children, but to call someone else. I found his card tucked in a kitchen drawer, half buried under expired coupons and broken rubber bands. Matthew Grayson, elder law specialist. He'd spoken at the community center 2 years earlier about wills and trusts. Most people hadn't taken him seriously. Too young, too thin, too many questions. But I remembered how he looked me in the eye when I spoke. How he didn't talk down to me like I was already fading. I dialed Grayson Law Office. He answered himself. This is Margaret Hill, I said. I need to talk. And it needs to stay quiet. I met him that afternoon in his cramped office above a bookstore, wedged between a struggling dance studio and a nail salon that always smelled like acetone and oranges. He didn't rush me. He didn't start with questions. He poured tea, listened, and let me talk. So I told him everything: my diagnosis, the forged deed, the fake signature on my father's trust, the quiet, casual cruelty of children who had grown up believing love was something you traded for real estate. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment. Then he said, I believe you. Something inside me, some small, shaking part I hadn't noticed before, finally exhaled. Over the next few weeks, I worked with Matthew in secret. We drafted a new will. We transferred assets. We re-established power of attorney with protections so tight they couldn't be challenged. And most importantly, we stripped away every inch of access my children thought they had, one by one. I changed the locks, both literal and legal. I learned the language of trusts, irrevocable clauses, grantor rights, beneficiary limits. I asked questions. I took notes. I understood every line of what was mine. At home, I said nothing. When Emily showed up unannounced with a casserole and too much perfume, I smiled and asked about her kids. When Nathan sent a bland text, "How's everything going, Mom?" I replied with a thumbs up emoji. When Thomas asked if I needed help paying the bills, I thanked him sweetly and told him I had everything under control. They thought they'd already won. Thought I was too slow, too fragile, too lost. Let them think it. Let them believe they were dealing with the same woman who ironed their graduation gowns and stayed up all night baking birthday cakes from boxed mix. Eyes heavy with exhaustion, they didn't know me anymore. Not this version. This version watched, waited, planned. One night, I sat by the fireplace with a thick binder resting in my lap, my new will, a quiet weapon. Every page felt like another brick in a fortress no one would ever breach again. Matthew had even prepared a letter to accompany the final version. I read it out loud to myself. "To my children, you taught me what forgetting feels like. I hope you never forget this." The last thing I did that night was write 3 dates on the back of an old receipt. Each one marked a step, a decision, a silence. They thought I was breaking, but I was building. And soon, they'd see exactly what I'd built when it was already too late to stop it. Later that night, I sat alone in the garage, cross-legged on a crate, the old heater humming softly behind me. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling, memories sealed in cardboard, labeled in Henry's handwriting, Zma's, Emily's art, Mag's, old work files. Dust drifted through the slanted overhead light like time suspended in midair. I pulled down the heaviest box. Mag's, old work files. Inside was my life before I was just Mom. Old business cards, worn notebooks, laminated name tags from the law office where I worked before the kids were born, back when I had a corner desk, a window, and an inbox with my name neatly typed on the label. I had forgotten how much I'd given up. Not lost, given willingly for them. The garage door groaned as the wind pressed against it. A branch scraped the siding. I didn't flinch. I kept going. Letters I'd written to Henry when he was stationed overseas. A rejection letter from Columbia Law, kept like a scar. And tucked beneath a folder of tax returns, a small photograph I hadn't seen in years. Emily in her first dance recital. Nathan holding a baseball trophy too big for his little arms. Thomas asleep on my chest, sticky with ice cream. I stared at it for a long time. Then I stood, walked into the kitchen and laid the photo gently on the table. Beside it, I placed my last heating bill because it was me who paid that. Not them. It was me who worked double shifts when Henry got laid off. Me who pawned my engagement ring to pay for Nathan's braces. Me who skipped every vacation for a decade so Emily could go to art school in New York and never once came home for Thanksgiving. Me who let Thomas move back in just for a few months after college. And he stayed 2 years without paying rent. I remembered every sacrifice, and not once did they ever say thank you when Henry got sick. I didn't ask them for help. Not because I didn't need it, but because they were already too busy, too distant, too comfortable letting me carry the weight alone. I cooked for him, bathed him, held him through every coughing fit and every fall. Every day he forgot his own name but remembered mine, whispering it with trembling lips. After he died, they didn't even stay the full week. Nathan had a conference. Emily had a gallery opening. Thomas didn't even show. They only remembered me when a lawyer called. Now they hovered like flies over an open wound, waiting for me to rot. But I wasn't done. Not yet. I went upstairs, opened my closet, and pulled out the brown leather journal I'd kept hidden all this time. Inside were records, receipts, notes, journals of every loan I'd given them, every unpaid promise, every missed visit, each one dated, each one detailed. I wasn't keeping score back then, but now I needed the full picture, because when people try to rewrite your story, the only way to survive is to make sure your truth is louder than their fiction. I turned to a blank page and wrote, "They think I forgot. I remember everything." The pen shook, not from weakness, but from rage, from clarity. From a fire I thought had died with Henry but had only gone quiet for a while. The next morning, I dressed in my Sunday best, pearls, curled hair, lipstick like armor. I wasn't going to church. I was going to war. And this time, I wouldn't be the one kneeling. The courthouse smelled like dust and bureaucracy, ink, old wood, and quiet resentment. I sat across from Matthew Grayson in a narrow hallway with flickering lights and water-stained ceiling tiles. He slid a thick folder across the bench toward me. "This," he said softly, "is everything. New will, trust established, durable power of attorney, living directive. You're protected." I ran my fingers over the folder, smooth, heavy, final, and swallowed hard. "Will they know?" I asked. "Eventually," he said. "But not today." Double quotes, "good." Today wasn't for them. Matthew stood and straightened his tie. "You ready to file?" I looked up at him and nodded. I'd been ready the moment they tried to erase me back home. I pulled into the driveway and sat in the car for a long moment. The house looked the same, but I didn't. There was something sharper in my reflection in the rearview mirror. A squareness to my jaw. An unfamiliar stillness in my eyes, not soft, Not sad. Resolved. Inside, I made tea chamomile. I added honey, not for sweetness, but for steadiness. The house was quiet, a rare calm, though I wasn't naive enough to think it would last. The phone rang just after noon. Thomas. I let it ring once, twice, then I answered, "Hi, Mom," cheerful. Too cheerful. "What do you need, Thomas?" A pause, then a laugh. "What makes you think I need something?" "Because you always do. I was just checking in," he said. "Wanted to see how you were feeling." "Fine," I said. "Busy though, yeah?" "With what?" He didn't really want to know. It wasn't curiosity. It was surveillance. "I've been learning," I said. "About trusts, estate law, and how easy it is for someone to commit fraud." Silence. "Then, is this about the papers, Mom?" "No," I said, my voice flat. "This is about me and the fact that you forgot I was still here." He didn't speak. "We were just worried," he finally said. "You weren't worried," I replied. "You were waiting." I ended the call. The next day, I met Matthew again, this time in his office, where we finalized everything. He double-checked the filings, confirmed the trust security. Every asset locked down, redirected, irreversible. My house no longer within my children's reach. The accounts protected by layers they'd never break. My legacy now written in stone. Walking back to my car, I passed a bookstore and stopped at the display window. A memoir sat on the shelf. "The Silent Women Speak Loudest." I almost laughed. Back home, I stood in the living room and looked around the couch where Thomas used to nap, the fireplace where Emily hung stockings, the kitchen where Nathan spilled orange juice and cried over college rejection letters. And then I looked down at the folder in my hands, not just paper and ink, but armor. They thought I was weak. They thought memory loss made me disposable. But I remembered something they didn't. I built this family. I held it together. And now, I was setting it free. Not for them, for me. It started with cinnamon. The smell drifted through the house like a memory, warm, sweet, familiar. I hadn't made my apple cobbler in years. Not since before Henry got sick. But tonight, it was back on the menu. I set the table with my best dishes, the wedding china, white with tiny gold vines along the rim. The set we only used on holidays and once on the night Henry told me he was dying. Tonight, I was using it for something else. Justice. I lit the candles, folded the napkins. I even played the old Frank Sinatra record they all used to roll their eyes at. I wanted it to feel nostalgic. I wanted them to believe just for a moment that I was slipping back into the woman they thought they could walk all over. They arrived right on time. Emily was first, her heels clicking against the hardwood like accusations. Nathan followed, his phone glued to his hand. Thomas showed up with a six-pack of craft beer like a frat boy at a potluck. "Wow," Emily said, looking at the table. "This looks amazing, Mom." I smiled. "Trying something special," I said. "Thought we could have a nice night. Like old times." They relaxed just a little. We ate. We laughed. Or rather, they did. I watched, listened, waited. Halfway through dessert, I stood. "I almost forgot," I said, wiping my mouth with my napkin. "I have something for you all." Emily perked up. Nathan finally looked up from his phone. Thomas tilted his head, curious, like a puppy. I walked to the sideboard and picked up the envelope, the one with gold trim and thick paper. "I made some updates," I said. "To the will, the house, everything." Emily's smile twitched. "What kind of updates?" Nathan's shoulders tightened. "What are you talking about?" I took a slow breath. "I've decided to change how things are divided," Thomas scoffed. "Mom," I cut him off. "No, you listen." They froze. Not because I raised my voice, but because I didn't. "I know what you did," I said, setting the envelope on the table. "All of you." Their eyes flicked between each other, guilt bouncing silently back and forth. "I know about the forged documents, about the trust my father left me that Nathan cashed out behind my back. I know about the lawyer you visited, the conversations you thought I didn't hear, the plans you made for this house." Emily opened her mouth, then closed it. Nathan's jaw tightened. Thomas stared at his plate. "I may forget names, dates, sometimes even why I walk into a room," I said, "but I will never forget the silence." I slid the envelope across the table. Inside is the updated will. Everything has been placed into a trust, irrevocable, ironclad. My house is no longer yours to fight over." Thomas looked up. "What the hell, Mom? What the hell?" I repeated, my voice low. "You forged my name, Thomas. You tried to steal from me." He pushed back his chair. "You're paranoid." I stood to calm, steady. "Then sue me." Emily whispered, "Mom, you're being dramatic." "No," I said for the first time in decades. "I'm being clear." I turned to Nathan. "And you stole money meant to protect me. Money my father left for me. And you kept it. Through every year I struggled. Through your father's illness. Through every sacrifice I made, you never once came forward." His face drained of color. "I was going to pay you back." "No," I said. "You weren't, and now you won't have the chance." I stepped back. I'm not leaving you this house. I'm not leaving you my money. I'm not leaving you anything but the truth. Chairs scraped as they stood. Voices rose. I didn't answer. I walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water. Let their noise fade behind me when I came back. They were already halfway out the door, too shocked to yell, too embarrassed to cry. I watched their backs disappear into the dark, and for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a mother. I felt like a woman reclaiming her name. The letters went out the next morning. 3 envelopes thick, white, sealed with a weight far heavier than ink or paper, 1 letter for each of them. No ceremony, no warning, no dramatics. I didn't text. I didn't call. They'd done enough talking already. Inside each envelope was a personal message, handwritten, deliberate, final. Not just an explanation, but a reckoning. To Emily, I wrote, "You always spoke about art, beauty, and legacy. But when it came to mine, you saw only opportunity. You used my fading memory like a ladder. You stepped on my dignity in designer heels. This house will not be your gallery." To Nathan, I wrote, "You were always the leader, the decision maker. But you made choices for me instead of with me. You stole from me before I even knew I was missing something. The trust my father built to protect me, you spent it on yourself. I hope it bought you everything you believed I didn't deserve." To Thomas, I wrote, "You used to cry when I left the room. Now you laugh when you leave carrying pieces of me. You thought being the youngest gave you permission to take without giving back. But the boy I once held is gone. I don't recognize this man. And I don't owe him a damn thing." I signed each letter not with "Love, Mom," but with my full name. Margaret Hill. Not just a mother, a woman, a witness. And now, a wall you will never climb again. Then I made one. Final stop. It was a small office near the edge of town, a brick building with a faded blue awning. St. Eliz's Shelter for Women. They recognized me as soon as I walked in. "We weren't sure you'd come in person," the director said softly. Her name was June. She wore glasses, no makeup, hands rough from real work. Nothing polished, nothing performative. "I wanted to," I said. She motioned for me to sit. "You've done something extraordinary, Mrs. Hill." I shook my head. "No, I'm just correcting a mistake I almost made." They had already begun the process. Legal documents filed. Property transfer underway. My house, my sanctuary, my battleground. My prison was no longer just mine. It would become a safe place for women like me. Women discarded by the very people they once lived for. June's eyes filled with tears as she read through the deed. "You're saving lives with this." I nodded, but my voice broke when I said, "I just want someone to feel safe in it again." That night, I packed a small suitcase, a few clothes, my journal, Henry's last letter, and I left. No goodbye, no fanfare. I moved into a small apartment across town. Nothing fancy, just quiet, mine. A place where you could hear your own thoughts without being told they were fading. The calls came for days. Emily, Nathan, Thomas, voicemails layered with disbelief. Then anger, then guilt dressed up as outrage. I didn't answer. The silence was their inheritance. Let them sit with it. Let them shout into it. Let them remember it, because from that point on, their mother didn't just walk away. She walked forward. I never expected it to go public. I never imagined my story, my pain printed in black ink on cheap newspaper pages, passed along grocery store lines and waiting rooms, but there it was. Front page of the Woodland County Chronicle. Local widow donates home after family tries to seize. Edie may forget them, but they will never forget this. My photo sat small in the corner, taken from behind as I handed the deed to June at the shelter. They hadn't asked for a quote. They didn't need to. They used my words anyway, the ones I wrote in those letters. By the time I made my morning tea, the calls began. Reporters, talk show producers, advocacy groups, strangers. "Can we feature your story? Would you speak at our event? You're an inspiration." Inspiration, a strange word for a woman who once sat alone in a dark kitchen, wondering if she was disappearing. The article didn't name my children. Thank God for small mercies, but they knew. Everyone in town knew, and so did they. Emily texted, "You made us look like monsters." Nathan emailed, "You've ruined our reputations." Thomas posted a bitter comment under a fake name on the Chronicle's website. They thought I'd feel ashamed, but I didn't. I was seen, I was heard. And for the first time in a long time, I was believed. Women started stopping me everywhere, at the grocery store, the pharmacy, the bank parking lot. "Thank you," they'd whisper, "for showing us we're not crazy, for reminding us we're not alone." One woman, maybe in her late 60s, brushed my hand as we reached for the same can of soup. She met my eyes and said quietly, "They called me forgetful too. But I remembered enough to lock my bank account before my son drained it." We smiled at each other. It was enough. The shelter sent weekly updates, photos, stories, progress reports. My old living room, the front room of the house, had become a reading space now. Warm lights, shelves of books, Quiet women who had nowhere else to go finally had a place with my name still on the deed. A home built from the bones of my old life and reborn with purpose. I didn't give interviews. I didn't sit on talk shows. Instead, I wrote letters to advocacy groups, lawmakers, churches, libraries, elder care centers telling them what had happened to me. And how often it happens in silence. I called it the quiet theft because that's what it was. A slow erasure, polite, legal, almost invisible until I refused to disappear. They wanted me quiet, forgetful, grateful for scraps. Instead, I left them with headlines, unanswered calls, and a house full of ghosts they would never inherit. That night, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment. Smaller, yes, but filled with light. I brewed another cup of tea. Outside, rain fell softly, clean and gentle. I opened the window and let it in because for the first time in a very long while, I felt clean too. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror and barely recognized the woman looking back at me. Not because she looked different, but because she looked whole. My silver hair was pulled into a loose twist. My blouse was crisp. My slacks freshly pressed. Not for a funeral. Not for court. Not for anyone's approval. Just for me. I walked the block and a half to the shelter. No reporters. No children. Just the gentle hum of town life around me, dogs barking, a lawnmower in the distance. Jazz drifting from a porch to streets over. June met me at the door, smiling, arms open. "We finished the upstairs room," she said. "Come see." We climbed the stairs, the same ones where Henry used to carry Emily when she fell asleep in the car. Where Thomas once sat tying his shoes painfully slow on the first day of school. Where Nathan slipped and cried like he'd lost a limb, only to forget it an hour later. This house was memory. And now, it was something new. The room was painted a warm yellow. White curtains moved softly in the breeze. A small bed. A writing desk. A cushioned chair in the corner. It smelled like lavender and wood polish. "It's the quiet room," June said. "For women who need space to think. To breathe. To be alone but not forgotten." I didn't answer. I just rested my hand on the windowsill and looked out. And for the first time in what felt like 100 years, I didn't feel watched. I felt witnessed. Later that day, a letter arrived in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Emily. I sat on the back porch of my apartment, opened it slowly, and read. "Mom." I didn't understand what I was doing. I thought I was helping. That's not an excuse. You were right. I was selfish. We all were. I'm sorry, not for the house, not for the money, but for forgetting you were a person before you were our mother. And for assuming you wouldn't fight back. You did. And I'll never forget that. No signature. Just one final line at the bottom. "I hope you find peace in the home you made with or without us." I folded the letter once and tucked it into the back of my journal. I didn't cry, not because I didn't feel, but because I already had. I'd felt everything and I'd survived it. That night, I lit a single candle and sat in the living room. No TV, no phone. Just me and memory. Not the kind that slips away, the kind that stays. I remembered every sacrifice, every betrayal, every step I took to reclaim myself, and I knew this. Even if my mind falters one day, even if my body forgets the names of streets, recipes, or people who once meant the world, I will never forget who I am. They tried to erase me, but I rewrote the ending, and now they will never forget that. Thanks for listening. Dawn and number 39. Don't forget to subscribe and feel free to share your story in the comments. Your voice matters.